If we look at the world today, things seem to have contradictions, right? We have all of this social media, but we never socialize. We have all of these ways of keeping in communication, but we never talk to each other. We have all of these things that were given to us to bring us closer together, and now it divides us even more than we were before. Not even to talk about politics, right? That's even worse, because it divides us and continues to divide us. Everybody has great intentions, but our thinking is different. Instead of listening, it divides us. Instead of loving each other, it even turns into hate at times. How weird is that everything has happened, right? Just real quick, it makes me think that when I was preparing, I was thinking that if that incident in the gospel today would have happened today, how many people would have stopped and take a picture and just kept going and posted it everywhere so everybody could see it? A few weeks ago, there was a guy in the French Quarter who was walking around punching people. That's all he was doing. There's a whole lot of video of him doing it, but there's nothing of anybody trying to stop him. What happened to us? What happened to us as a society that we no longer care about our neighbor, that we're more interested in how many likes we can get on a post than it is about helping someone? You see, as Catholic Christians, we have to remember, always remember, that all life matters to God. I'm going to say that again. As Catholic Christians, we have to remember that all life matters to God. That's not a political statement. That's a theological statement. I'm not going to stand up here and talk about politics because when I was in training, I was warned not to. But that's not a political statement. We have evidence that God loved us so much that He sent His Son to die for us. Not just certain people, all of us. In today's gospel, just a little explanation of what Jesus was talking about, right? This Samaritan that helped the man, right? Jesus used this Samaritan in His parable because the Jews hated Samaritans. They were completely different than we are, so we don't like them, we don't associate them, we don't do anything with them. But Jesus made him the good guy. And He went over and above what He was supposed to do, what this man needed, right? He put him in the inn, He paid for his care, because there was no hospital. The priest, you see, the problem with that part is that the priest in that day, you see, when he looked at the guy, the victim, he thought he was dead. And a priest in that day, if he would have touched that dead body, he would have been considered unclean. And he wouldn't have been able to participate in the sacrifice. So that's why he passed on the other side. Because you see, the problem sometimes is in our church is that we put the ritual ahead of the relationship. See, sometimes we need to stop looking at what we do and look at how we do it. We need to be more compassionate to those people who come in as visitors. So what if they don't know when to stand or when to kneel at the right time? We set an example for them. We don't need to pass them by. We don't need to insult them. We need to lead them to where they need to be. When I was preparing this homily, it kind of turned out different toward the end of the week, right? Because when God shows you all of these things where we need to improve our lives, all of a sudden He opens up a door and He says, well, look at this though, right? Because there is those great stories, right? If you watch the news, it's nothing but bad. But if you look in your community, there's awesome things that are happening. A few weeks ago, there was a tornado hit a man's house. And a bunch of people from this community went and cleaned up the mess and fixed up his thing because he couldn't do it himself. I heard a story this week about a guy who was kind of shut in his house, who doesn't like to sit still, but his neighbor cuts his grass for him because he can't go out and do it himself because of his health. How many times do we look around? Last week we had 274 flags dedicated to the veterans of this country, thanking those men and women who fought for us. This community has become neighbor to a lot of people. And we need to be joyous in that. We need to recognize that. And we need to improve on ourselves. How do we take what we do in this community to reach out to the rest of the world? To be an example to the rest of the world. Because we're answering God's call. We're listening to what God has to say. You see, the man in the gospel today, he asked the question, but who is my neighbor? You see, and once Jesus explained it to us, we can't ask that question anymore. The question we have to ask ourselves is, am I a good neighbor? What can I do to improve the way I treat others? What can I do to be more compassionate to those people I disagree with? What can I do to help those who don't have as much as I have? How much more can be done? One person already told me, he said, of course I've done enough in my lifetime. I said, sure. Is it all done? There's always something more to be done. So our question for ourselves today, the question that the gospel asks us is not, who is my neighbor? The question for us today is, am I a good neighbor? Lord, help me to do whatever you need me to do. Give me the courage